everybody, and welcome to another 1993 movie, because we just cannot get out of this year.
We're stuck. Help us, please.
Celebrating another 30-year anniversary. 1993's Body Snatchers. Absolutely fascinating movie, and I am so interested to hear why Kyle picked this, because I forgot that I knew this VHS cover.
It's just about the cover, isn't it?
No, it was. So, I mean, we talk about VHS covers all the time.
Yeah,
we do. And there are, and the ones that we talk about, I would say, are more eccentric and not as this one's not subtle, but this one's more subtle than a lot of the ones that I've talked about. At least they're the ones that I've claimed I remember so much. But my grandparents would take me up to Vermont every summer when I was 5. So, I mean, 95, 96, we would go up there for those years, like those early 90s, mid 90s years. This cover art was one that I remember really, really vividly. And I think that it's because I used to do these, instead of, haunted houses, we would do a haunted yard, and we would set up a lot of Halloween decorations in our yard, and we'd do like a little walkthrough, and my grandparents and I and my family, it was like the highlight of our October, and a lot of paper mache, a lot of like styrofoam heads, a lot of mannequins from the bridal store that my mom and my grandmother worked at, right? So it's like this cover art really evoked a lot of that in me, this sort of cocoon opening up to see a person underneath, which is sort of what I always thought and felt from these replicated things that we would use for these Halloween decorations. And it just stuck with me. It just totally stuck with me. And then now, as somebody who's more versed in horror or just any genre, knowing that Abel Ferreira made this,
so weird.
That is a version of Invasion of the Body Snatchers. This is actually the first version of Invasion of the Body Snatchers that I've ever seen.
Oh, you haven't watched the 73 one?
I've not watched the 73 one, though I've owned it forever. I've not watched the 50s one. I've not read the book. I actually, in watching this, I realized that even in the lore of Body Snatchers, there's some stuff that I wasn't. I mean, this obviously probably takes some liberties, but in the lore of Body Snatchers, there was some stuff that I didn't realize was happening. So this is a pretty clean viewing of it for me. I think actually maybe the only information that I've gotten was from that Queer for Fear episode on Shudder that talked about Body Snatchers, which I talked about on the show before. So this helped lead into that. I had the Snapcase DVD that I watched with the widescreen on one side and the standard version on the other for this podcast.
So you're in good company, I guess. If this is the only Body Snatchers movie you've ever seen, according to Roger Ebert, you've seen the best one. Roger Ebert infamously gave this 4 out of 4 stars and said it was the best adaptation of the novel he's ever seen.
Really?
This movie's production is wild. You already said the director. We got the director of Driller Killer and King of New York and Bad Lieutenant making this movie right off of Bad Lieutenant. The story was written by Larry Cohen with Stuart Gordon writing the screenplay.
Yeah.
And it's produced by Warner
swore
Brothers.
That was why he picked it.
Yeah.
I didn't know.
Yeah.
I didn't know. But when I saw those names come up, I was like, holy shit.
Yeah. Dude, we'll get into the cast in this in a second.
And 87 minutes or whatever. I'm like, yes, This is a perfect horror movie night movie.
So this is potentially one of the biggest flops we've ever discussed on this show.
I took down the number 2.
Box office
crazy.
flop. So a $13 million budget with a domestic box office of $428,828.
Are you kidding me?
Yeah, nope. So that's how. But here's the thing. It almost was intentional. This movie debuted at the Cannes Film Festival to great acclaim. People were like, this thing's going to be great. But then it was supposed to come out in October of 92. And then Warner Brothers decided to put out Innocent Blood instead. They thought that a vampire comedy would do better. They were wrong. That movie is also a flop. But then they were afraid that the horror genre was kind of overwhelmed with very serious movies, because you had Candyman, Bram Stoker's Dracula, Hellraiser 3 all came out in 93. So they kept rescheduling the movie and then just unceremoniously released it in 12 theaters in January of 1994.
That's crazy pants to me. That's nuts.
Yeah, it's fucking wild. But I have to say, this is one of those movies where I enjoyed my watch. I thought that this was like a well-made movie. I think that there's a lot that you can discuss and analyze about it. And I also think there's like some cool, just like practical effect shit that we can like geek out about. But this is kind of one of the hardest movies for me to be like, where do we go with this exactly?
Yeah, I guess I was expecting a little bit more. Like this is like I said, first time watch for me.
Well, again,
I just
the box art and everything about it screams low budget bombastic movie, but it's actually like a legit studio film trying to do a serious sci-fi horror movie. So it's kind of like if we did an episode on Alien, you know what I mean? Like it'd be like, yeah, it's great.
Carly leaned over to me and she was like, this kind of feels like PG-13, like teen horror to me. And besides some of the,
there's a lot of boobs. There's a lot of
I was like,
besides
besides the nudity and besides some of the more like scary effects, I'm like,
yeah.
Maybe, yeah. I kind of see that. It's certainly more tame for a Ferrera movie than I expected. I was expecting a little bit more, but then it also like delivered on some of the goopier / like alien-y things that I was hoping for. I didn't feel dissatisfied with the amount necessarily.
I think Ferrera's exploitation comes out in the nudity though, because so much of like I was floored that like you could show someone coming out naked from the back side and he does it from the front side, and I was like, whoa. I legitimately made an audible
like
like
the rating way
wow
up.
What is that is a choice. Also look, cast is insane, right? You got Forrest Whitaker up in there. You got Meg Tilly,
Gabrielle Anwar,
Arlie Emery,
and then Kyle from Child's Play 2 plays the best friend in the movie Platt.
Platt, yeah. But also Gabrielle Anwar was in her element in like 1993. Yes. She was the it girl for like a good 2 years there.
And I think this was kind of the beginning of the end of her it girl phase. When I looked at her wiki page, I'm like, this was a huge bomb, and it didn't look like she had any big home runs after that. And then it's like, it's one of those sad things where you scroll through a wiki page and the hyperlinks become less and less frequent on the titles, and you're just like,
I've never actually thought about that, but yes, that is quite telling.
What else was she from?
She was in Scent of a Woman. You'd know her from Scent of a Woman.
She was in If Looks Could Kill.
Yeah.
If you've ever seen that.
Oh,
pilot.
So she's very like erotic thriller / thriller.
Yes, she's an erotic
like,
thriller girl.
Kyle, I heard a sound in the background, but also one of the movies you might remember her from was Turbulence 3 Heavy Metal. Just seems like the type of movie you'd have watched.
1, fuck you. 2, good call. I haven't seen it, but it's now on my list. And 3, I opened up a beer from the brewery called Just a Kiss. Because that's all you need to get your body snatched.
Yeah.
Which, when Meg Tilly comes out of the closet, full frontal, I leaned over to Carly. I go, Body Snatchers? More like Snatched Bod. And she goes, don't say that. Don't say that on a podcast.
Well, she can't stop you.
Well, here we are.
She won't listen.
It's too late. I'm a dad now. I say everything I want to say.
Oh, guys, quick pause. I clicked into the Turbulence 3 wiki page because I remember Turbulence. Turbulence is like just fucking
Speed
Air
in the
Force
air.
One, speed in the air. So first of all, this is the box art, which
Yeah, it's bad.
grabbed my attention. But
Is that the Langoliers?
That looks exactly like the Langoliers.
so I was just scrolling through because I'm like, that looks like a horror movie. Did they get more weird and demonic? And I'm scrolling through here, and I just read this sentence with no context, anything else. All I know is that it's about a band that's on a plane. Kate realizes that the cult is planning to crash their plane into a small church with hopes that it will release a demon.
Guys, why are we sleeping on the Turbulence
that's
franchise?
an immediate watch, y'all. That's an immediate watch.
Find us the Tubi link.
Scott, did you have something that you were sipping on for this one too?
I was, but then I was so very unceremoniously shut up by Matt.
Well, Turbulent. It was a very turbulent podcast.
Yeah,
okay.
yeah. Turbulence 3 does take precedence. Megan picked again this week. She picked this one. Heat Seeker. It's got a snake on it, but I feel like plants are these killer plants are heat seekers. Also,
they're body heat seeking for sure.
Yeah, and if you need to rehydrate, I have what plants crave. Electrolytes.
Gatorade.
There you go. I want to expound on one of the things that Roger Ebert found so brilliant about this movie, which I actually agree with. This is the only Body Snatchers movie that doesn't take place in a small town. That is, in the books and every other adaptation, it's like this invasion is happening in a small town. This one, it takes place on an army base. And Roger Ebert pointed out that he thought that was a brilliant decision because there is no other place where conformity is more praised than on an army base, so that it adds this extra piece of satire. It becomes almost like a military satire simultaneously while being an adaptation of it, which I do like. I think that this is a good movie, guys. Like, I just don't. Yeah. I don't know if it's the best horror movie night pick in the history of the world. There's some great moments, but I'm like, this is like a legitimate good movie.
Well, the thing about making it being a good movie that might not be the best for the show is also the pacing, because it's a little slower than our usual fare.
For an 87-minute movie, it felt longer than 87 minutes. I'll say that much.
It's not I'm not criticizing the movie. I do think that the movie is good. I think that it is good in a way that makes me not super hyped about it. I'm not upset about the watch, but I'm also not gonna be like, damn, I gotta tell people at Creature Feature that they're sleeping on Body Snatchers from 1993.
Right. Well, Scott, they shouldn't be sleeping at all. That's how they get you.
Oh shit! I was gonna have some chamomile tea as my drink because I'm like, snatch me, plants.
Melatonin, please.
I won't lie, man. This movie, they make a good argument to be a pod person in a couple scenes.
Yeah, and also
they're like, all the anxiety and stress goes away, and I'm like, tell me more.
Yeah, and I'm also like, so are you telling me that I get to become Swamp Thing? Yeah, because that is, how like kids.
It's a childhood dream come true, right there. Yeah,
it's like if someone wanted to get 6-year-old Megan in a van, they would just say free puppies, right? If they wanted me to turn into a pod person, they'd just be like Swamp Thing, and I'd be like, fucking put me to sleep, knock me out.
Well, and I love that there's this element throughout the movie, right? You have the main girl, her little brother, and her dad. They're kind of our quote unquote heroes, and then her pseudo boyfriend, military base guy Tim. I love that throughout this movie, you see the dad constantly tempted by the promise of being a pod person, so much so that like they don't have to show us him being taken over. Like when he's alone in the office listening to them sell to Forrest Whitaker, and then the next time you see him, he's a pod person. It's like you walk away from that being like, he probably offered himself to them.
He sold out.
Yeah, like he like 100%. Like it's, but I think that's kind of.
But I still didn't believe it. Yeah. I still wasn't sure. It still like left.
Dude, when he first got shot, I'm like, oh no.
Yeah,
that kid Billy or whatever his name is, he got really fucked over in this movie because, so first of all, he sees her body disintegrate, and then he sees the fake one and the pod person, and he goes, that's not my mommy's dead. And I'm like, that's fucking dark. And I was like, also you see the pod person version of your mom like fully nude, and that's gonna mess with your mind. And then he watches his dad get shot in the chest, and he watches his dad's body dissolve into red goo. So it's actually quite good that he got turned into a pod person and then thrown out a window.
Dude, when they threw that kid out of the fucking helicopter, I was like,
I laughed.
I laughed. It's hysterical. Yeah. We talk about a lot of bad kid actors on this show, and that kid got it. Like that kid was like pretty fucking good. That schoolroom scene immediately when he was just like holding up his painting that's different from everybody else's, and she's just like,
I thought this could have been a zombie movie because every kid put up what looked like brains.
It did.
It was a fun scene though. I think that's my favorite scene of the movie, except for when Gabrielle Anwar's pod person comes down out of the drop ceiling and then splashes into the bath.
No,
So fun.
I like that scene. That scene reminded me a little bit of Nightmare on Elm Street. When
that's why
she's
I like it.
but no, I would say the scene right after that where she stops her dad from being duplicated and that freaking like half a human thing comes crawling out from underneath the bed.
It looks like the monster from Wreck in the fucking top of the apartment complex.
Hell yeah.
It's so sick.
It's
that's a good back-to-back.
Yeah.
That whole sequence is great. So because you go from her body snatcher to his body snatcher to Meg Tilly being like, where are you gonna go, where are you gonna run, and the full like that sort of like that's the pinnacle of the act 2, right? Like that is fucking peak. Everything happens right there, and it's it's such a great sequence.
Yeah,
and because I also agree with Scott. It's like, I mean, even though the movie is 87 minutes or whatever, like there are parts where it's like, oh, okay, we're just sort of like experiencing, and I
it's also because we know what's going to happen.
Well, we do.
It's well
I mean,
tried.
we know the story by now. Even me, I don't know shit about shit, but like I knew that what was going to happen.
Do you almost think that it would be better, like, go back 30 years? Do you almost think it would be better to not name it Body Snatchers? Just name it something else and like kind of surprise people with it being an adaptation of Body Snatchers? Because
it wouldn't have worked.
I agree
that way
with you.
in
The title
1993.
I mean, it made $428,000 anyway. I don't think it couldn't have done worse.
Well, so let's look at what was the one that was it Nicole Kidman?
That was just called The Invasion.
The Invasion.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, is that another copy of the Body
yeah.
Snatchers? Okay.
Yeah.
That was the most
like,
recent one.
I mean, that movie just by nature and time probably did better anyway, but I don't think it did that great.
Yeah.
Like,
I just mean with the pacing of this movie, it'd almost be better if you were part of the mystery, right? Like you're watching it and you're also questioning it, but like when you're watching it fully aware of what an Invasion of the Body Snatchers movie is, you're kind of just like to use a Simpsons quote, it's kind of just like, when are we going to get to the fireworks factory? Like you're just like sitting there waiting and waiting and waiting for the exciting part to happen. And again, it's brilliant. I would love to pop this movie on to somebody not telling them what it is.
Yeah.
And I bet that they would have a fucking blast with it, trying to figure out what was going on until the pod people showed up, and then they'd be like, oh, it's Invasion of the Body. Like, I think that could work. But you're right. It's also hard to market it without just saying like, yeah, it's an adaptation of Invasion of the Body. But that's the problem.
It's an interesting property. It's kind of an interesting property.
It's an interesting property, but that becomes the problem with super well-known properties is like, you can't really do the dramatic tension with a story that everybody fucking knows. Like, could you imagine doing a Dracula movie? Like, imagine doing a Dracula movie where you don't introduce Dracula for the first hour of the movie, and you're just following Renfield, like, selling real estate across.
Hey, Matt, I hate to break it to you, but they made that movie last year. It's called House of Darkness, and it was fucking terrible.
Yeah. See, that's a bad way to do a movie.
Well, there's also The Invitation, which they kind of like gave away that it was vampires, but it wasn't supposed to be given away to those vampires. That came out last year too.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think that it might sound like we are being too hard on Body Snatchers 93. Keep in mind that we all think that this movie is very well made. Like just just because we're critiquing the property does not mean that this isn't a pretty damn good movie. But
no,
it also
I would say that watching
like bombastic.
Watching this and last week's movie back to back was a wild experience because it really I was watching a movie that I had a ton of nostalgia for with my boyfriend's back. So I was already in that like that warm comfort area of like, oh, this is my happy place. But it was just literally just watching the opening credits to this movie. I was feeling like, oh yeah, this is my shit. Like, like I've said it a million times. There is something about the way that we made these mid-90s horror films that just scratches an itch that even like the most important horror film of like the 70s and 80s doesn't quite scratch for me. And I can't place my finger on. I don't know if it's the type of cameras that they were using. I don't know if it was just the way they edit it. But even just like I said, that music with the title, and the title's like slowly evaporating throughout the entire, like, it's just something about it where I'm just like, oh, I'm home, baby. Like, I just feel like I'm at home when I'm watching it. I think it's a great adaptation. I think it's a great movie. I do think it's worth watching. If you're a sci-fi horror fan, if you love Invasion of the Body Snatchers, this is such an interesting take where it's faithful to a point, but the probably the least faithful adaptation at the same time.
Like, conceptually, it's super faithful, but textually it's not. It's very interesting because the military thing totally read. Like, it was like the conformity of it,
and that's so Larry Cohen and Stuart Gordon to be like,
and those bases are just small towns. It's like you're answering two questions here. Like, you're how do you make it your own, and how do you keep it true to like what the source material is, and it's by making that choice. And it is so Larry Cohen, and some of the like the creature stuff is so Stuart Gordon, and then like Abel Ferrara just bringing in the exploitation bits, even though they were light. Like, it was just it was a very cool concoction. I would put this on my shelf. I don't know if I'd watch it a ton, but I would have it on my shelf as like a breaking case of emergency. If somebody was hanging out and they wanted something a little bit heavier, like they're like, I want to watch like a horror movie, but I want something that's like well made. I'd be like, this, it's a slow burn, but when it gets going, it's good. Like, I got your fix.
Like the third act of this movie.
How big is your
fantastic.
trench coat that you open up with all the movies that somebody?
There was a
literally
point
just Body Snatchers.
I had to stop doing it because it was so much work. I had at one point, Kyle, I had a 200-page Word doc that was...
Oh, yeah, I remember this.
Yeah, it was... So I have a separate Word doc that's just all of the DVDs that I own in alphabetical order. I made a secondary doc that was broken down into specific genres and subgenres, so that I could just go and type in slasher movies, and it would bring me to the part of the document where if I was doing like, oh, people want to do like a Halloween, like let's watch some slasher movies thing, I could just type in slasher and see all of the slasher movies that I had in my collection.
Oh, Matt, quick plug for something that might be easier for you though, but it will be time consuming to get everything over into that.
Letterboxd?
There's a no. There's an app called CLZ Movies. It is a pay app, but it's a barcode base. You can scan the barcode, and a lot of people have already done their physical media collections on there. I use it, and I fucking love it. And it does allow you to sort of tag your own thing. So if you wanted to do slasher, if you wanted to do movies that take place in a hospital, if you could tag it hospital, like you can do all these things. I want to say it's maybe $15, but as far as a database that I use,
and that's a one-time payment or like a monthly
one
payment?
time.
I could pay $15 for that.
Oh yeah,
I
might want that even.
I was gonna say if it was $15 a month, no, but I was like, ooh, is this like $1 a month? Because I'll pay $1 a month for this shit.
And they have one for books. They have one for music. They have different variations.
You're speaking my language, Kyle.
I just want to tell you guys what the moral of this movie is.
Sure.
What's that?
Everyone hates spaghetti squash.
Oh.
Yeah, dude, it's the worst.
I've tried.
I love vegetables, but I hate spaghetti squash.
Yeah,
I'm gonna shoot all the missiles at spaghetti squash.
Hey, do you have an idea for a podcast but don't know where to start? Or do you have an already existing podcast that you want to take to the next level? Well, check out WeKnowPodcasting.com. From concept development to theme music to editing to logos, WeKnowPodcasting.com is a one-stop shop for all things pod. Don't hesitate to hit us up. We're very nice.
All right, Kyle, what's your double feature?
My double feature is Day of the Dead.
Really? I was thinking Dawn of the Dead, but actually Day of the Dead makes a lot more sense.
Yeah, you got military base, you have military base, but no, I think I actually had this conversation the other day. Although Night of the Living Dead is maybe in my top 3 films of all time, I think that Day of the Dead is the best film of the Dead series.
You and I agree on this, and very few other people do, actually.
Yeah, you're alone. It's 2-on-1, but yeah, I don't agree.
And I understand everybody else's reasoning for any other movie except for Diary or Survival. I understand why people would rank any of the other ones as their top. But that aside, that's for another time. That's my double feature. I think they both have a lot to say about the stuff that they're talking about in their films, both Body Snatchers and Day of the Dead.
I think I said this on the episode we did about Day of the Dead forever ago, but in my opinion, it feels like the only of the Dead movie where the satire is intentional, whereas both Night and Dawn, they almost feel like happy accidents that like made the movie make the movie have an additional beat to it. But Day of the Dead feels very pointed. Like that's the only of the Dead movie where I really think that George started writing it with something that he wanted to say. He had something on his fucking mind making that movie.
Well, then all the other ones do have something to say, but they're too heavy-handed. So it's like it really feels like Day of the Dead is that bridging of the gap that is so uber successful in its execution, but then not necessarily in its reception.
And phenomenal gore. Just some of the most phenomenal gore that they've ever done in those movies.
So good.
All right.
So good.
Scott, what would your double feature be?
I'm going with Starship Troopers. Ooh. I mean, it's just criticizing the military-industrial complex.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I would start with Body Snatchers and end with Starship Troopers because Starship Troopers is... I mean, you can't go wrong by ending your night with that.
No. So both of you have the military side of it pretty heavy on your end. I went with something a little bit off the beaten path, but I think it makes sense. I think it makes sense as a double feature. The big difference between these two movies that I'm about to pair it up with is this one, it takes a long time to get to where we're expecting it to go, but once it gets there, it's great. And I'm pairing it up with a movie that takes about 10 minutes to get where we want it to go, and then it doesn't take its foot off the gas, and that is the 1988 remake of The Blob.
Hell yes.
There's just something stylistically about those two movies, even though they share almost no similar DNA, pun intended. It just feels like it would make sense, like it would flow.
That makes
very
a lot
well.
of sense. These are all solid double features. Yeah. I would sit for any of these.
Mahone and
I would sit for a lot, so that's not high praise.
All right, Kyle, is there anything you watched, read, listened to, etc., that you want to talk about?
This is so not what we normally talk about here. But
so is mine. So let's do this.
Yeah, friend of the show, Camp Nightmare host, Mr. Dunn. He recommended a book. He gave it to me at Creature Feature called "Accidental Saints: Finding God in All the Wrong Peoples" by Nadia Bolz-Weber, who is a pastor, a Lutheran pastor, who gets a lot of flack for her upbringing and for her life and where she is now and how she incorporates basically her past into her present. She was an addict. She swears a lot. She does all these things, and she applies that all to her teachings now. And I think that there's a lot of backlash against preachers or people who find God who then utilize those things to preach about God. I'm not going to try to evangelize here, but I have had some struggles in where I'm at spiritually with sort of this old way of thinking about God. As much as I love liturgy and as much as I love like where God's come from, I also experience God in a totally different way as a present day person that just doesn't get touched upon. So anybody who kind of gets closer and closer to that like present day, like this is how you can and how I have experienced God, is really interesting. It's also like not a very heady read. I didn't need a lot of like biblical information to follow along, even though all of it was like footnoted and referenced. And I just wanted to give JB a shout out for that. And if anybody has any interest in that stuff, which is not a lot of our listenership, but at the same time, like I don't know, I just don't read that stuff often. I don't seek it out because it's always kind of been hurtful and offensive. And like this wasn't, and that was such a delight.
Yeah.
So
I definitely want to check that out, and I will recommend you any Rob Bell book as well. Rob
Bell is one of those other absolutely. Rob Bell is one of those other people too. So besides the movies that I had watched for this show this week and Wicked World, my life's been in shambles. So that book's been a nice sort of like 5 pages here, 5 pages there. I finally finished it. He gave it to me, like I said, creature feature last year. So it took me a year to read a book, but thank you, JB.
And we might as well just change the name to Holy Book Night, because I'm going to talk about the book that I'm currently reading, which is Kindness and Wisdom: Why We Need Mr. Rogers More Now Than Ever Before, which is really cool. It's basically 2 books in one. The first half of the book is about a 115-page biography on Mr. Rogers' life, and it's fascinating and it's interesting, and that's probably the part I'm going to talk about the most in this little segment. But then the second half is literally 10 tips on how to live your life more like Mr. Rogers, pulled from the people who knew him the most, like people sharing the things that he taught them that they started to apply in their day-to-day life. But some of the stuff that I never knew about Mr. Rogers from reading this biography, and I feel like I'm maybe not as much as Jim Henson, but I hold Mr. Rogers pretty high up there as being someone knowledgeable about his life. I like that this biography doesn't shy away from the fact that he was not a flawless person, and that there were times where he was a bit prideful and a bit too much of a workaholic and all of that stuff, and they bring that to light. But the thing that made me go, I never knew that, was actually that as he got older, the original intention was he was going to create enough episodes of Mr. Rogers that a child could watch it from ages 1 to 3 every single day, watch an episode and never have a rerun. And then that was all he wanted. He wanted to create 3 years worth of a child's life daily. He did that. He successfully did that. But then as he got older, he had people make him sweaters and clothing that matched exactly how he was dressed in older episodes, that he felt that the language had evolved beyond, so that he could reshoot those scenes with more up-to-date, gender-inclusive language. And would change things to be slightly more gender neutral in his depiction. He had a song that was my mommy does dishes and my daddy goes to work, was one of the lyrics, and it's that is just not the case anymore. And he felt like it would be irresponsible to allow that to rerun with that type of gender specific lyric, so he rewrote the song and reshot the song to be reinserted into the reruns and stuff like that. It's just what a fucking
intentional
guy.
And actively intentional.
Yes.
That's on the fucking money. I have to change it now. It can't just exist. That's so interesting. That's really interesting.
Yeah, to be it's not enough to just be oh, well, back then that was okay. It's well, I have the ability to make it okay right now, so I'm going to do that.
Right. Right.
Wow. Another great artist did something similar to that. A man named George Lucas, who said this scene needs more CGI monsters, and I could say that this is just where the special effects. This is just where the special effects were back then, but right now I can make it so much better. But no, I do think that is I was I literally found myself choked. There's 3 or 4 stories that I've heard about Mr. Rogers a million times. And they still, every single time that I read these very specific stories of the relationships that he had with his crew, I always get choked up. I also constantly forget that Michael Keaton got his start as a cameraman on Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood.
It's incredible. I did not know that.
Yeah, he got his start there. And he said he was a jokester, and they talked about how he Mr. Rogers never cursed. The exact quote was, "I've never heard Mr. Rogers curse. I've certainly heard the puppets curse." And he would they said that the one time his one was Lady Eleanor. He would always use as oh, I can say all the mean things that are inside me, I can say through Lady Eleanor, because it doesn't feel appropriate to say through me.
And she's royalty,
yes.
So you can't what do you?
She's beyond reproach.
Yeah, and they said one time he just was driving. He's the window rolled down, And he goes, I just see Lady Eleanor's head come out the window and go, eat shit, and drive away. So
is that not in that Tom Hanks movie?
That did not make it in the Tom Hanks movie,
I don't want to fucking
shockingly.
watch it then.
But
Okay.
yeah, I mean, just, we stand Mr. Rogers over here at Horror Movie Night.
doubt.
I think we can all agree the world would be a better
yeah.
place if more people acted like Mr. Rogers did in his life. It's him,
No kidding.
RBG. Like, we got a couple people that we here at Horror Movie Night feel like, maybe lean your life lessons into those people.
Yeah.
All right, Scott, take us home.
It's hard for me to follow that up, but ironically,
Anything that's changed your life, Scott?
Yeah, you didn't read a
anything
book that
that's-
emotionally changed you as a person?
no, that was last week. But no, Megan and I are watching Elvis, and I say are watching because it's so fucking long that we're still like at the 3/4 mark, and it's fun. Love Baz Luhrmann. We love Baz Luhrmann movies. It's the most restrained Baz Luhrmann movie. It starts fucking straight up Baz Luhrmann, and then once it's basically like it starts at a sprint and then it's like, oh shit, this is a marathon, or this is like an 800-meter dash, and so it slows the pace down significantly, and because after the first 20 minutes it doesn't really even look like a Baz Luhrmann movie, which is fine. It's still good, and I mean, I'm really impressed with a lot of it.
Austin Butler's great in it.
Yeah,
but...
he's fantastic, and the woman who plays Priscilla is a dead ringer. Megan does not like Tom Hanks in the role of the Colonel, because she's like, anybody else, it would have been fine. It just all I can see is Tom Hanks in a fat suit, and I'm like, I do, but I can also suspend my disbelief and see him as the character. It's supposed to be ridiculous, because it's Baz Luhrmann, and I like it. I worry though that this last 3/4 of it is not going to show enough of the drug use and the I think it deifies Elvis is what I'm trying to say. Sure. Is like it makes him look like this wonderful civil rights activist, and I do accept and understand and appreciate that was part of him, who he was, his upbringing, and the core of his being. But at the same time, it's a little deifying.
So just because we had a little bit of Oscars talk last week, and Elvis is one of the only other Best Picture nominees that I saw, I think it's really weird that movie is nominated for Best Picture, but Baz isn't nominated for Best Director, because I think I would have reversed it. I would have definitely been like, oh, Baz is the Best Director. But I agree with you. I think that movie has way too many pacing issues to justify being one of the best 10 pictures that were made this year, no matter how much style Baz brought
Baz
to the
Luhrmann
picture.
Isn't really he's not a biographer. It's not
No.
what he does. He does the lavish, absurd visual aesthetic. Yeah. I feel like they gave him Quaaludes. They're like, here, like, Baz, like, you got to chill.
Yeah, Baz, I almost feel like it's a bummer, because Baz Luhrmann should, in my eyes, be one of those directors that we look at the same way we look at a Tarantino film, or like these like tentpole directors.
It's his.
Yeah, it's like, oh, you're watching this because it's a Luhrmann film, but
that's why we're watching Elvis. Like, I want to be clear.
But I mean, I feel like across the board, he should be in that same, because it's not like he's popping out movies nonstop.
He does like
one every 6 or 7 years almost. Like, he should be in that same way that we look at, like, oh, it's a Peter Jackson movie, we've got to go see it in theaters. It's a like one of those truly upheld, like, visual. I don't know. It's just, it's weird. I think about that constantly. Like, this is a dude who's made at most 6 movies, and all 6 of them are on such a epic visual scale. Like, how is he not being placed in the same conversation as, like, when James Cameron shits out a movie, everyone's like, well, you got to see it in IMAX. Like, I feel like Baz Luhrmann's films demand
either, as far as I know.
like Baz Luhrmann's movies just as much demand, like, seeing it on, like, an IMAX. It's such a visually stunning thing with so much use of sound. Like, you would want that full theatric experience. I don't know why we don't look at them like look at those films in that same lens. It's so strange to me, but whatever. But yeah, I mean, Elvis is fun though. It's a movie.
I think I'm gonna watch it tonight. I haven't seen it yet.
If you're gonna spend 2.5 hours on an Oscar nominee, you should put Everywhere, Everything, All at Once above Elvis.
You know, I gotta laugh at how many times Matt has actually gotten Everything Everywhere All at Once right, and how badly he's fucked it when he's gotten it wrong.
The ratio is interesting.
No, it's better than I was expecting, and I'm not dissing Matt. I'm just
he's
saying
having a hell of a season.
It's because I'm talking too fast, and in any like normal casual conversation, I will be about to say the name, and then I will pause for exactly 2 seconds to like process which word comes before what.
But yes, Matt,
people are gonna be like, "Oh, he adjusted that in the edit. God damn him!" Like people aren't gonna believe it.
No, I'll leave that unedited.
If you get a chance, I would watch Everything Everywhere All at Once first.
Yeah, that was 1993's The Body Snatchers. You might think, how could they possibly have more films from 1993 to talk about?
1993 only had 8 movies,
and we're doing all of them in a row.
All of them.
So stay tuned. I have yet to watch next week's movie, so I don't even know how to give you anything about it. So just tune in and find out.
You're listening to the Geekscape Network.